All
4
right.
albums down. 2 to go. Another visit. Is this visit 5 to the Talking Heads?
It
I
is.
think.
It is.
Yep. And not the last one. I don't. Are we doing one more after this? I don't know.
No, I think this is the last one.
Oh, is
this
it?
is it? Yeah, I don't think
Oh,
we're doing.
man.
Unfortunately.
Sense.
I just had a tear go down.
Or
my
Little
cheek.
Creatures, which is great.
Yeah, so this is Talking Heads Speaking in Tongues, which comes in at number 49 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 6 in 1983, number 366 of all time. It is Talking Heads' third highest rated album, behind Fear of Music from 1979 and Remain in Light from 1980. We covered both of those records on previous episodes. And Talking Heads comes in at number 21 in overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And I believe I start this off. And the Talking Heads...
One thing, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We have done David Byrne, by the way, with Brian Eno as well.
Sure.
In My Life in the Bush of Ghosts.
Yeah.
So there is another appearance. Continue,
Classic
Matt.
album there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Talking Heads have done it again, and this is a wonderful album. This is I gotta maybe go back and listen to these and try to get my true ranking of this, because this is up there. This could be number 1 or number 2. It's there's Talking Heads 77 and More Songs About Buildings and Food. I think I only listened to those truly once when I was doing the pure cold listen, so I think I need to give them a little bit more time. But man, this is great. This is I knew a couple of songs in here, actually the first and last track. So Burning Down the House is the big single off of this. That's a very well-known song. And This Must Be the Place that's a song I think I heard from like a movie soundtrack, or maybe it was in a TV show or something like that. And I forget what it was, but I remember hearing it and then not realizing till years later that it was actually Talking Heads. So, but that was something that stood out to me. But this is just great. To talk about dance music, I mean, this is just a very, this kind of takes a certain beat and kind of just lets it flow throughout the album. It's very upbeat. It's very catchy. It's got a lot of funk guitar, a lot of like that kind of almost like Prince kind of funk guitar going on with it. It's got a little bit of avant-garde nature, a little bit like a song like Swamp kind of has this like almost like a guttural chorus kind of
really
going
bluesy,
on there.
Though.
Yeah, it's like bluesy, and it's really catchy. I love Girlfriend Is Better. That's just another very kind of quirky David Byrne vocal. All David Byrne's vocals are really kind of this, the quirky, nerdy, kind of neurotic, kind of vibe that he goes with. But they have just carved a lane for themselves that to me fits so well with so many different types of genres. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of world music in here. You've got some with the drum beats and the kind of the percussion instruments. There's a couple of there's more marimba, kind of things like that. So they're getting creative with different types of instruments there as well. Cool bass lines, interesting guitar parts, and just like a really cool, unique sound that really is their own. And as soon as you hear a Talking Head song, it's them. It's not while they're drawing from a lot of different places, they are truly a unique band in and of themselves. So I don't think there's a bad song on here. This to me is it's very accessible, I think, even though he's kind of got a weird, maybe off-putting voice to some people, but to me the music would more than make up for that if anybody would have an issue with it. It's catchy, it's danceable, it's fun. I have no idea what the lyrics are about. I'm sure one of you guys might comment on that. So, I'm sure that would even make it even more interesting if I gave it the time. So
it's definitely, it's like neurotic, like kind of.
Yeah, he did before,
stuff,
like like slice of life, like what's going on, like how do I process what's happening in my life type of stuff, and just weird imagery and whatever.
People are weird. I'm paranoid. Yeah. I mean, remember we went off that idea that he may or may not be on the spectrum a little bit, and I do feel the lyrics to some degree kind of talk about the challenges of connection. A little bit. So
So man, I'm a big fan of Talking Heads. I'm gonna walk away from this podcast with this being potentially on my Mount Rushmore favorite quote unquote new acts or acts that I became familiar with that I just really
discoveries.
Yeah, exactly. So big thumbs up on this.
I think it's me, I think, right?
Yes.
Do I go next? Sorry if we're out of order.
It's okay.
Yeah, this I described this, while it is it does genre weave. I was waiting to see if you were going to mention world music, Matt, because there's definitely a world music
didn't I say that?
in this.
I thought
you did. I was going to say toward the end
okay.
you did. So
yeah.
I was surprised. The two that you didn't mention, I was going to say, were world music, and there is a little bit of glam. I feel like glam rock that is in here that I felt a little bit in something like Swamp, like not over the top, but elements of the sound of the guitar and the general vibe. But my takeaway, and I know you guys, I've always liked Talking Heads, but yeah, I think I've gained as great an appreciation for them as any group we've done. I don't know if I think you two have always been like, Sing from the Hills, and I'm very high on them, but maybe not quite there. But the thing that stands out to me is the bass. I mean, how Tina Weymouth doesn't get more credit for, like, as a bass player that rates, is that the bass lines always stand out to me on these songs. And there's a lot of guitar. I use the term angular guitar, which is kind of like my catch-all. Like it's how I sometimes overuse like an industrial sound to describe like a mood as much as nuts and bolts sound of it, literally and figuratively, nuts and bolts. But in this case, like what I call the angular guitar is sort of that art rock guitar sound that comes in, where it weaves, it can be sparse and lean, but it almost feels like it's weaving in between, like air in between the other instruments, and that angular guitar is all over this. The Talking Heads are always doing art rock, but they're doing, if we talked earlier about Metallica doing accessible metal and Run DMC in the 80s doing accessible hip hop, right? Like this is like art rock done at the most accessible level you can do it, while still being clearly definable as challenging enough to be called art rock. Right. And I mean, that's a gift. I mean, to do accessible art rock is kind of like doing accessible thrash metal like Metallica did. Now, they sound nothing alike, but that's, I think, what takes a group from simply good to like, that elite level. And that's what the Talking Heads are remarkably good at. I always am amazed also at how much I can like a group where the lead singer is so not in my wheelhouse of what I want my frontman to sound like, but I somehow always am able to process him. 77 was probably the toughest for me to get away with that, but I still never truly like David Byrne's vocal stylings, but they work in the context of the overall sound. But for me, the Talking Heads is the rhythm section and the guitar and the interesting construction of the composition, which is, I think, where David Byrne earns his stripes for me, right? Because he's a big piece of that part of the equation. But yeah, I was thinking, like, where would I put this in the context of all of the albums? And I might, honest to God, I might like this one best.
Yeah.
Just because of
I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, I really like the chances they were taking. I think the solo projects they all went on, bled into it. Like, David Byrne got stranger, but also brought in the world sounds and I think a higher level of production. And I think that dance element that the rhythm section, not just rhythm section, excuse me, Tina Weymouth and I always blank the guitar player who was also her husband.
Jerry Harrison. Jerry Harrison is a guitar player. Chris France is the drummer.
Chris France, right? And so like all of the Tom Tom Club is basically what I was trying to get to there. But like they bring that dance element that's always there, but they've really refined it at this, and yeah, it kind of comes together perfectly. And I always am also amazed when you have bands that sound so tight that the pieces seem like they're all, and then you find out like that many of them hate each other, and that always cracks me up too. So yeah. But yeah, this is a strong thumbs up for me as well. I feel like I'm saying that a lot this week, but it's true. So
yeah, I'm going to be a broken record because I feel like I say this every time, but they are the most consistent, best band that that we've listened to. They are up there in terms of doing something different, combining pop with all of these genres that we've talked about. I think there's a little funk in here as well. We haven't mentioned that.
So this would be your pick for most consistent artist we've covered, huh?
Of the 80s, at least.
Of the 80s.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well,
okay.
I mean, they kind of split between 70s.
Yeah, they got
and
three
80s.
of the 5 that we covered were in the 70s.
Yeah, but I feel like every album I've listened to of theirs is just great, and I respond to it in the same way that I respond to all their albums. I'm just kind of blown away by how original they sound, their ability to, you know, genre hop and dabble or combine things in interesting ways, the ability to, you know, like John is always preaching about the bass and the drums, the way they get the songs to make me move. That is kind of a key element of them that I respond to, and David Byrne's kind of delivery as well. That just comes into play here as well. There's no bad songs on here. Again, it's another way that they're consistent. They never feel like it never feels like they're filling the albums out. It's always note perfect in terms of variety and inconsistency in the album. So that's another great thing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
And I get the feeling I know the answer, but I'll do this. If you have the Talking Heads and you switch out David Byrne for, say, Brian Ferry, do the Talking Heads become a better band?
I don't think so. I think there's some characteristic that David Byrne brings in terms of his personality and delivery that is key to what makes them special.
Gotcha. So. What do you think, Matt, on that?
Yeah, I'm with Josh. I think I mean, his vocals, I get what you're going for, but like, I don't know, to me, when I think of Talking Heads, the first thing I think of is it's everything David Byrne, right? And a lot of it's not just his vocals, but also the image of like dressed up in that suit with the greased back hair and the glasses, like, and so I don't mind the vocals at all. I think they fit right in. I'm fine with them. They don't bother me. I think it's a very important part of their overall sound.
Yeah, to me, the Talking Heads are really interesting because the corollary I draw with them in terms of like as a band structure is like the Smiths, in that there are some people who love the Smiths because of Morrissey, and there's some people who love the Smiths because of everybody else in the group and not Morrissey, and there's some who like the whole package, right? I think for the Talking Heads, like, I greatly enjoy the band, despite the fact that as a frontman, David Byrne is a lessening factor on it for me. So sure. I totally get what you're saying. You know what I mean? Because like, I get how his delivery, because there's plenty of non-traditional frontmen and, you know, atypical that I really like as frontmen and stuff. But I just always think to myself when I listen to Talking Heads, I'm like, God, if they put somebody who is smoother in front, like, and that's why I just use like Brian Ferry, right? Like, you know, the Avalon version of Brian Ferry, right? But it could really be, you know, Simon Le Bon, or, you know, I'm just trying to think of like different people. And I always am like, if you put one of those type singers in front of this group, right? Like a more, like, I wonder, like, would it add or take away? Would it lose edge? Or
yeah, I think it would,
okay,
and I think it would.
I think it would lose personality. Too.
Yeah, it would
that's,
take.
Yeah,
it would,
that's what I wonder.
And,
yeah,
but I also don't. I see what you're saying, because like he's got this totally non-traditional, you know, voice that could be very annoying or could be off-putting, and so I get that. I mean, for me, you talk about the art rock that's got the. You know, that's what did you say? There was a marriage of art rock and melody. It wasn't melody though.
Well, art rock and mainstream appeal would be
mainstream.
Yeah,
right. But his voice is like the part that sounds as the art rockiest sounding.
Well, I'll give you another one. Like Radiohead couldn't be Radiohead without Tom York, and
correct.
He would I see be challenging as well. But at no point do I listen to Radiohead and say I would like to exit Tom York from the band. I don't know why I feel that way. sometimes about Talking Heads.
Like, because he's got a whiny voice. He's got it's not crisp. It's not clean. It's piercing at times. It's not a traditionally good voice. It's weird. Tom York. Yeah, he might be a little weird, but he's definitely more traditional. He's more just I
think it just gets in the way of the music I want to hear sometimes, because
that's understandable.
It intrudes on me a little bit, and I'm just like, no, stay in the background. But you can't have his voice and his style and float in the background, even in the way that other singers who stand. And maybe that's the difference, I guess, with somebody like Tom York. Another sort of kind of art rock band with a not like I can fade Tom York out if I don't want to hear him, right, and stuff like that.
Yes,
and it's harder for me. Like, David Byrne is omnipresent for me on these albums, and I wouldn't say I hate him, but there are definitely times where I'm like, no, go away. Like, I don't want to hear that right now. I want to hear the what's going on in the background, and but it's impossible also because he's structuring these songs. So I mean, you'd almost have to have him be like the studio guy, know, but I think you're right. I think in my head it sounds better than what it would be, because I think they might lose their edge. And if they lose their edge, they lose a little bit of their Talking Headsness.
Yeah, it's I never had that reaction listening to him saying
Me either.
It's just something that I feels a piece of the music and is interesting in a way that other singers aren't. I think it's testament too that you still like this band despite being distracted by the singer. Some way.
Well, I mean, that's how good the music is behind it, and also,
exactly.
and by the way, also the composition of these songs. Like it's I think what's really, if you had told me before this, like, rank the Police and the Talking Heads, right? I would have told you I like the Police better, but like now, after listening to all of these albums, right, it's clear I like the Talking Heads better. And I think it's because what I imagined the Police to be, like all of these great instruments, instrumentation married with composition. I realized that the Police have the instrument part, but the composition sometimes is inconsistent, whereas the Talking Heads, composition and structure is always like on point in terms of what they do. And we haven't covered them yet, and they don't sound exactly the same, but I feel a lot about the Talking Heads like I feel about Sonic Youth, that I always like the construction or deconstruction or, angle they take on songs, because it always interests me. And that's, and that's a lot of that is David Byrne. And so
I think too, for me, one of the reasons maybe I'm okay with it is because I've known them for so long. And it's a very even though I didn't know a ton of their albums or anything like that, or their deep catalog. I knew enough singles. I heard enough of their stuff, and liked it to the point where I was just like, I just accepted what David Byrne was giving me vocally, and maybe I would feel differently if I had never heard of Talking Heads and just started listening. Maybe then I would have been like, what the heck? I don't know. But there was definitely some familiarity here that might have helped me along with that a little bit.
Can we dispel also that like the Talking Heads are not like just David Byrne, because like the pieces behind, like I know that's and I think that's like criminally unfair, because like I said, like what makes them so appealing to me is largely despite him,
not him
in many ways. And I think he as we've talked about in some of the things, he likes to put forward that mythology, but listening to these albums, it's like you just can't find studio people that are going to do this. Like there's a element musically and of the overall piece that's not there. And candidly, I don't like David Byrne stuff nearly as much without these people behind him. It's sort of like Gwen Stefani, right? Like I like her much better in No Doubt than I like her when she's doing Bananas or stuff like that. It's like, that's great, but I like when she's, a part of this tighter unit. So
Well, John, this is also, these musicians, it's what you get when you make them try out 3 times for the band, like David Byrne did with Tina Wade. She almost did make the band. So yeah.
I know, but you're right, John. They're absolutely deserving, and they're an integral part of what makes the Talking Heads great, and they should get just as much, attention as David Byrne does.
Well, and that's why they're great, because all of them together make the band, right? And they all kind of need each other in one way, shape, or form. So because they were never as successful without each other, so that says something too.
I'll tempt fate too here, and I'll leave myself open to comments and stuff. I will go on the record and say this: I'd rather listen to anything the Tom Tom Club did than whatever that David Byrne thing is that he did with Spike Lee. So that is not as appealing to me.
I have no idea what that is.
Tom Club. No, I'm just saying that's considered like the high end art. You know what I mean? And the genius there. And like I listened, it was fine. But like,
you mean the American Dream album? Is that what you're
correct? But yeah, give me the Tom Tom Club albums. They did as side projects over that. And for me, that's like, if I say that, then I mean we know the deal for me at least in terms of my taste.
Hey,
so.
just give me the Talking Heads.
Yeah, they're damn good. They really are. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, once again, I feel like we're saying it a lot this week. Thumbs up across the